So having just finished reading the Canterbury Tales, I had to go back and reread Cracked Pot Trail by Stephen Erikson. Much like Canterbury Tales, that involves a group of pilgrims traveling somewhere telling stories, this book also follows a group of pilgrims on the road telling stories. It's very short. It's not really a novel, novella, I guess, 200 pages. But it's probably the best book I've read this year and the best book I've read in a long time. And what I would say, for in my opinion, it's Stephen Erikson's best book, the best thing he's ever written. I think everyone should read this. Everyone should go out, if you can find a copy of this somewhere, and read this book. If you haven't read any Malazan, doesn't matter. If you haven't read any of the Buckland and Corbel Broach novels, doesn't matter. Everyone should just read this. I went into it this time. This is probably my third time reading it with the eye of someone who has never read any Erikson, just to see if you could read it. And you totally can read this book. You don't need any information at all. You need to. It's so good. So it's a satire. First and foremost, it is a satire, and it is hilarious at points. It's so funny. It will make you laugh out loud. The weird turns of phrases, the weird metaphors, the just goofy slapstick comedy at times, and subtle comedy at times. And just the whole meta narrative. It's like meta within meta, and there's so many layers to it. And I know for a fact that there's a lot that I don't pick up on, because I'm not an author or a critic or anything. If anything, I'm one of the fans. I'm one of the entourage in this novel. But there's just so much to it, and it's not just all comedy and silly stuff as well. I think it encapsulates all of, or maybe I shouldn't say all of, but a lot of Erikson's philosophy on everything from civilization and power and justice and what's wrong with society. And it's very much, he'll make comments about modern society, but we'll have it cloaked in sort of the language and setting of this novel. But it at times he's on the nose, at times it's subtle. There's also times when it's really dark, and the humor can be very grim in it. But there's just, everyone should read this novel. So first and foremost, it is a satire of artists, critics, and fans, and the interaction between all of them. So it's very meta in that it is the author Stephen Erikson himself writing this character who is an artist and sharing from this character's perspective his views on art and on critique and on fame and everything that has to do with that. So I found that to be similar to the Canterbury Tales, where Chaucer's narrator is sort of a fictionalized version of Chaucer. Well, I don't know if you could say that the narrator in this, Avistidian Flicker, if he is a stand-in for Erikson or if he is a fictionalized version of Erikson, but I would say there's certainly aspects of Erikson's sort of opinions and beliefs and philosophies that are espoused by Flicker. But I think there's also it's sort of a satire of writers creating self-insert characters, because in this Flicker, who is the author's self-insert, he's a genius, he's very artistic, he's a great poet, he's a great writer, and he also gets to sleep with the two beautiful women characters, like which I think it's not Erikson sort of creating his own fantasy. I think it's Erikson, again, that meta narrative, he's created this character to represent him, but he's also making fun of authors who create characters that represent themselves, in my opinion. Again, you could write a thesis on this. There could be university courses, like literature courses, that are solely on this one book, and I think there should be. So I'm sure there's so much stuff I'm missing from this. But yes, the main plot is this group of pilgrims. They're moving from one place. They're heading to this city where there's the shrine to an indifferent god, which there's a shrine to an indifferent god. Then that's who they're going to worship at, and to ask for whatever they want from an indifferent god. The whole thing's hilarious. And the plot is that they're moving through this desert wasteland to get there, and they run out of food, and they start starving, and they think, what are we going to do? We're going to have to start eating one another. And it gets really gruesome and sort of dark, but in a comedic way, because they have horses, they have mules. But the whole group of people come to the conclusion that, well, they need the horses and the mules, so they're going to have to eat the people. And which people are they going to eat? Well, the artists, of course, because they're the least useful to society. So they're the most expendable. And so this whole story becomes a contest where the artists and the poets and the bards have to relate stories and sing songs during their journey, and whoever's the worst one gets voted off the island and gets eaten. Like literally they will kill them and eat them to survive. Even though they have horses that they could eat, and but the knights are like, no, we can't, you can't eat our horses. Anyways, the whole thing is just ridiculous. And especially as it gets later on in the story where they're nearing the end and they're like, oh, we're gonna make it, we won't have to eat any more people. They're like, no, we're still gonna keep killing and eating these artists because we have this whole contest going on, so we're not gonna stop. It's so funny. And I won't I'm jumping all over the place, but I won't spoil the end, which I usually do, but I won't spoil the end because I think everyone should go read this. But it leads you in a certain direction that me as the writer the first time I was thinking, oh, I'm so smart. Oh, I have this figured out. Oh, I know what's really happening and where this is leading. And then the last like 2 pages, just the twist. It's so good. Yeah, as you can see from me just gushing from this, in this novel, I would be one of the entourage. So there are a number of artists that are still alive at the point in this story. There is our narrator, Abbas Didion Flicker. There is Brash Fluster, who is a how can I describe him? He is a poet who he sings Gothos' Folly, the Lullaby edition. He also sings Anomendaris, set in rhyming triplets for children, that story about incest, betrayal, and death and murder. So those are sort of little in references that if you have read Malazan, you will know about Anomendaris, you will know about Gothos' Folly. One of the other songs Brash sings is about Clan Makar climbing up into his sewers to assassinate Lysine, the Empress Lysine, who is sitting on her royal throne on the toilet, and just like crude, goofy humor involving these 2 main characters from the main series. It's weird. It's not fan fiction vibes, but it feels like sort of a goofy story that someone would tell about. But it's actually Stephen Erikson writing this about these other characters that he has. Oh, it's so good. But yeah, the whole thing is like how critics and audiences eat the authors alive and eat the artists alive, like literally in this case. And if you have read the other Bauquelin and Corbel Broach novels, because I think this is number 5 or 6 in the series, which again, you do not need to at all. This is the only one that you do not need to have any knowledge of those characters or of their past at all to read this novel. But if you have, you will recognize a bunch of the characters. So sort of Bauquelin and Corbel Broach go on crazy adventures and mess up towns and cities and whatnot. And a whole bunch of characters that have been wronged by them are in this group of pilgrims they're trying to find Bauquelin and Corbel Broach to kill them. Because Bauquelin and Corbel Broach, I will say this, they don't really show up in this book until the end. Our group of pilgrims, some of them are hunting them, and like I said, the others are artists that are heading to this competition for the annual Greatest Artist of the Century competition. Then we do have some pilgrims like Purse Snippet, who is actually going to sort of the shrine of the indifferent god because she sort of needs something, needs absolution, needs, I don't know, she's sort of a dancer who, I guess she sort of feels nothing. She's very empty on the inside. She's very beautiful and has had so many men want her and need her, and she's given herself for so much, but she's also a drug addict. She's constantly like sort of trying to numb herself even more with drug. And part of the story is our narrator Flicker, who is promised to sort of grant her redemption. So one of the stories that he tells is kind of a retelling of this story. So it's weird. It's stories within stories within stories. But Flicker, who is narrating the story, is also telling the pilgrims a story that is sort of their story, but with slight changes. And he does that to his benefit because he's sort of a crazy genius. Another one of the artists is this guy Caleb Roud, who is a super old guy, and he's always wanted to win this award. And he's like 100 years old. And he's like, I need to win it this time. And all his stories are sort of stolen. He's just straight up plagiarizing. He'll find stories that nobody really knows and steal them and memorize them and tell them. And so he starts telling this one story that Flicker then has to finish, which is a really beautiful story. It's about an Imas woman, or an Imas village, and there's a young woman there, and it's sort of the end of winter, and they're all starving, and they're not sure if they're going to make it to spring. And then a fen shows up, so one of the fen, the Thelamin Toblakai, which are all names and stuff that if you know Malazan, you will know who these people are. But if you don't know that, then it's just like, oh, it's just an Amas village. It's a village with people called the Amas. That's all you need to know. So the fen shows up, and he's hauling a sled that clearly has a body on it, and they're really upset because they cannot turn him away. Like, he's a guest in their village. They're going to have to help him out and feed him and whatnot. But also they have nothing to feed themselves. And then also the sled carrying the dead body, bringing death into a village is very taboo, which Flicker explains is like, well, it's also pragmatic. It's not just a cultural thing. It's like bringing disease and death into the village could cause a sort of an outbreak of plague or something. So that's why people would butcher outside of the village and only bring in the meat and whatnot and the stuff that would provide life to the village, whereas death would stay outside. Anyway, so this fen comes in, and then he tells his story. So like I said, stories. We have Erikson telling us this story, which is Flicker telling us the story of the fen, the fen is then telling his story to the Imas village that he's at. And he tells the story of how his father, who is chief of their village, they were struggling from hard times, and they required a sacrifice, a human sacrifice. And so he decided that he will sacrifice his youngest son. So the speaker's brother. He will sacrifice his son to sort of save the village. But unbeknownst to him, that son of his is actually not his son. His wife had been raped by his brother, and this boy that he's going to sacrifice is actually the child of that union. And so the uncle, his brother, in order to save his son, kills the father, kills the mother, and grabs the son and flees. This fen, who is he is the other son, so his brother and uncle have taken off. He goes off in search of vengeance of them, comes across the sort of murdered and half-consumed body of his younger brother. So the uncle had stolen the boy away, but then had to kill and eat the boy to survive. And then finally on a glacier, they have the final showdown where the hero, the son, and the evil uncle fight to the death, and then the son kills the uncle, and then that's how he gets back, and then goes to the village, and this is recounting his story, and it's this horrible story. It's very beautiful in the way it's written because it's Erikson, and he's so good at writing setting and whatnot. And so the fen sleeps with the young Amas girl, and it's sort of the first time that she slept with a man, and I'm just going to read some lines from it. So this is the morning after. Her body was not quite entirely her own. She could feel the truth of this, its privacy now a temporary condition, quick to surrender to his next touch. Just stuff like that, just talking about sort of different things in life that people go through, and loss of innocence and whatnot. And the end to that story, which I will spoil that story within a story within a story, is the girl then goes outside the hut and sees her entire village has been slaughtered. The children, the elders, everyone has been killed. And she looks and sees the sled that the fen had been carrying, and the body under the furs is much younger than him. And she comes to the realization that this fen that she slept with, this was not the hero, the brother who was killing his uncle in revenge. This is, in fact, the uncle who, at this final duel on this glacier, it was the uncle who killed the nephew, the brother. And so, sort of evil won, and the hero doesn't always win. But the point of this tale, the sort of, if there was a moral, is that be careful who you let into your midst, because you could be letting evil into your midst, which plays into the major plot, or the rest of the plot of this novel, which again I'm not going to spoil. I love Erikson as a writer, but this has to be his very best work. I don't know how accolades in literature work, but he should have won awards for this. Like, I think the only reason he didn't is because it is fantasy genre, but also part of the Malazan universe, but also part of the Bocklin and Corbel Boach novel. So it's like sort of buried within layers of oh, I need to have this knowledge to read this, and then this knowledge to read. But no, I think everyone should just take this and just read it as is. Again, if you can find a copy, because this came out in 2009. I'm very fortunate to have this nice hardcover. I also have, this has the same cover, the collection of the second collected tales, which contains this novel. It's weird, I didn't realize it was the same cover. I think these are two different publishers, Tor and Bantam. Anyways, so a lot of it is talking about artists and what it means to be an artist, whether that's a painter, a writer, a singer, anything like that. Anyone who creates. and sort of the doubts and fears and sort of angst and issues people have with critics, and how of course it's all satirized. So at one time he's talking to the critic in this novel, which I'll talk about the critic in a second, and the critic says something he likes, and so the narrator, the artist, describes the critic in glowing terms, and how he's a wonderful, super intelligent genius of a person. And then later on in that page, the critic says something the artist does not agree with, and so the artist describes him as despicable, the very worst of the miserable humanity. So yeah, it's funny like that, but it's also funny in so there's two major sex scenes in this book, where I wonder if I can find it to read it to you. Not the whole thing, but so the two characters, they're chatting, and they sort of come to the conclusion that, hey, let's get it on. And the narrator follows with, "Shall we titter and wing gazes heavensward now? Shall we draw the veil of modesty upon these decorous delicacies? Is it enough to imagine and paint private scenes in the mind? A knowing smile, a flash of bared flesh, a subtle editing of grunts and pinches and shifts as elbows prod and jab. Dreamy our sighs, delicious our ponderings. What's wrong with you?" And then he goes on for a page and a half of explicit description of what these characters are physically going through. And it is a lot, but it's funny. And then the second time, so you think, oh, he's had his joke. The second time, so this is with the other character, a different woman. Oh, and I love this line. "In my weakness, which I call upon in times of need, I could not resist." Just lines like that. I mean, he was trained as a short story writer, so he's so good at putting so much into so short of a space. Like, just every sentence like that is just packed with either meaning or double meaning and humor. And anyways, "Was she the most beautiful woman I ever knowingly shared fluids with?" She was indeed. "Shall I recount the details? I shall not. In protection of her sweet modesty of that luscious night, my lips shall remain forever sealed." Line break, next paragraph. Oh, forget that. Again, page and a half of vivid descriptions of what occurs, including some sort of physiologically improbable anatomy. Anyways, it's very, very funny. Even the see, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm just flipping through the book now, and it's just the very start of the book is much like Canterbury Tales. It describes, it's like the general prologue. It's describing all of the characters, and his descriptions are so funny. Describing a woman's cheeks as a round face with cheeks blushed like slapped buttocks. I can't even say it without laughing. And little references about the two knights who are constantly fondling the pommels of their swords. Another of the characters that is described as the host, who I feel like I'm missing some insider knowledge with the host, because I guess the joke is with him is that he thinks he's really famous, but no one really knows who he is, and the narrator's constantly forgetting his name or just not saying his name. But his description of the host is full of bird metaphors and words. He was a tall hawk of a man. An expectant look came to his vultured eyes. Oil glistened on and dripped from the raven-feathered hair draped down the sides of his pressed-in head. This man noted all and scratched and pecked his list of offenders in jerking bobs of his rather tiny head. Anyone near would hear a grackling sound, in the manner of a cock exploring an abandoned henhouse. Clearly he was a man of sparrow fates. Cockerel eye glint, like swirling feathers. It just fits so many metaphors into this one paragraph describing this guy. Anyways, yeah, so one of the artists, this guy Nifty Gum, who is sort of he's like the celebrity. He's super famous, super good looking. He's won the award of the greatest artist of the century for a couple years, which, yeah, greatest artist of the century every year. He has an entourage, sort of three groupies, these three young women who literally hang off him. And I think in gushing throughout this video, I'm very much revealing myself to be one of them in this story. I'm not one of the creators. I'm not an artist, unfortunately. I don't think I can call myself a critic at all. I think I'm just one of the undying fans, which that's a joke because in this book one of the fans gets killed and raised by necromancy, and becomes an undying fan, and then literally eats the artist's heart out. But one of the sort of inside jokes that I do get is that the critic in this, whose name is Apto Canavalian, I think that's his name, is a direct reference to one of the, not editors, I don't actually know what his title is, I should probably look it up. I think he's one of Erikson's critics. He sort of pre-reads Erikson's novels before they're published and offers advice on them. I know I'm embarrassing myself now with my ignorance, but his name's like AP Canavan or something. It's basically this guy. He literally wrote in this real life man into his novel. And at one point, the narrator Flicker is talking to Apto and says to him that we artists have a way of getting back at critics like you. What we do is we write a character based on you into our stories, and then we harass the heck out of them in our stories, which is kind of what Erikson is doing in this, but in like a super meta way where he's revealing that he's doing it, but he's still doing it, and it's really funny, really funny. But it's not all sort of humor and satire. I mean, it is, but it's not just a big joke book that doesn't have any meaning to it. There is so much to it that there's so much to take from it and learn from it. For example, he talks about how art is not exclusive. It's not created for a specific individual, but good art has that illusion where it seems like this book is written just for me when it's actually not. So art is not exclusive in its delivery, but its magic lies in creating the illusion that it has done just that. Speaking only to you. That is art's gift. Do you understand, Knight? As such, it is to be revered, not sullied. The instant the observer, in appalling self-delusion, seeks to claim for himself that which in truth belongs to everyone, he has committed the greatest crime, one of selfish arrogance, one of unrighteous possession. On one of the very, very early pages where the narrator is introducing himself, he describes himself as basically as not a fantasy writer, but to me, I'm seeing this is how Erikson describes himself as a writer. So he says that, I am but a chronicler, occasional witness and teller of magical lies in which hide the purest truths. So teller of magical lies in which hide the purest truths. To me, that is just a perfect example of what Erikson is. He tells these magical lies, the fantasy genre. He also writes in other genres. They're lies, they're fiction, but within them hide the purest of truths. And I think that's really true. Like I said, this book covers issues of justice, of society and civilization and evil and good and right and wrong and love and lust and art and just so much in 200 pages, and it's just I wish more people would read it. I really do. If I could make everyone or recommend to everyone one thing, it would be just read this. Yes, I love the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but it is exceptionally long, so I do not expect people to actually read this. But 205 pages. Sit down and read this in one afternoon. So if you can find a copy, I'm sure you can get Kindle version of it for like $3. That that was me just gushing about one of my favorite short stories. I hope you enjoyed. Crackpot Trail by Steven Erikson.